Welcome to the Beacon Hill Podcast, helping you grow in your faith and shine for Christ. Thanks for joining us. Now here are your hosts, Pastor G.J. Farmer and the Beacon Hill Baptist Church staff.
Welcome back. Another episode of the Beacon Hill Podcast. Hope you've had a great week. I'm here with Joel and Josh today.
Hey, everybody.
Thanks for having us on.
Joel's looking really hip with the backwards hat today.
I know, and the vest.
It's very student pastor-ish.
It's how you know I mean business. I turned it around and was getting stuff done.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's, I remember back in the day, if I were wearing a hat while I was playing basketball or skateboarding or something, which, by the way, I used to skateboard.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you hacky sack too?
No. That was before my time. But when I turn my hat around backwards, like you said, it means I meant business at that point.
I hope you all know how serious I am about this podcast today.
Well, that's great.
That's right.
That's great. We've got some serious stuff to talk about.
For sure.
Sunday, the message was entitled A Spiritual Inspection. We talked about how we are to inspect our lives regularly, in particular for fruit, as Jesus was talking about in Luke 6. I'll just read the 3 verses here. It says, a good tree doesn't produce, by the way, this is verse 43. A good tree doesn't produce bad fruit. On the other hand, a bad tree doesn't produce good fruit. For each tree is known by its own fruit. Figs aren't gathered from thorn bushes, or grapes picked from a bramble bush. A good man produces good out of the good storeroom of his heart. An evil man produces evil out of the evil storeroom, for his mouth speaks from the overflow of the heart. Now I'm reading there. This is the Holman Christian Standard Bible.
It's the HCSB.
Yeah, this is
it's a little extra.
This was the first edition that came out, so it's a little bit different than what I used on Sunday. This is by the way, this is my favorite size of Bible that I have, like as far as taking it and doing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The print is super tiny,
Yeah.
so I'm struggling a little bit with it now. But I was excited because this month they released this size in the new CSB. They had been holding out all this time, and this one, get this, okay? So I hadn't even planned to talk about this. So this one was given to me by my mom and dad for my birthday in 2004.
Wow.
So a little thing though, this was an early birthday present. In 2004, we actually bought this from the Lifeway table at the Southern Baptist Convention.
Mm-hmm.
That particular year, the Lifeway table or booth had a band that was an up-and-coming band, little band known by Casting Crowns.
Oh, man.
Wow. Yeah.
And they were singing at the Lifeway booth. And we were just walking around. I was buying my Holman Christian Standard Bible right there next to Casting Crowns.
We're the body.
And I didn't even know.
Dang.
Didn't even know.
Your life song
I know,
changed
dude. Yeah,
right
man.
then and there.
Yeah.
I also have this exact Bible when I worked for Lifeway Centrifuge Camps, and they gave us all one in the year 2005, summer of 2005.
He's trying to one-up me here.
I'm not. You got yours first.
They-
I'm just saying. And
maybe they would. So this was like when Holman Christian Standard Bible first came out,
Yeah.
and they were like really pushing it, and they were trying hard to get it out there. But
And
anyway.
I also cannot read it hardly anymore. It's
yeah,
so
most
small.
of the people are probably
Can't.
like, okay, this is the nerdiest pastor talk I've ever heard in my life.
Welcome to Bible Talk.
This is
yeah,
it.
yeah. So we're talking about fruit. But yeah, Joel, you said you had a question for us.
I mean, we don't have to get too far into it with our Bible talk, but my question was, we are talking about fruit, and we're going to talk about some serious stuff today, but what is the best actual fruit? What's the best fruit to eat?
Now, is that what we think the best fruit, like our favorite fruit, or just what we think's the best one?
I think you're overthinking it
Okay,
already.
sorry.
Just you, man. What's the best fruit to you?
I like a little island flair, so I like pineapple and bananas.
Pineapple.
Oh, man.
All right.
Coconut? That's not my answer. I'm asking you if you like coconut.
I do like a little coconut.
Is it coconut a fruit?
I don't know.
I don't think so.
Is it not?
It's a nut.
Is it? That makes sense.
It grows on a
Is
tree.
it a nut though?
I don't know.
If it's not, they've messed up.
If
Just like
you
with tomato.
Here's
Are
how
still
I-
watching. Thank you. Thank you for still
It is not.
listening.
Is
Yeah.
it sold in the
Wow.
fruit
This
and
is
vegetable
the.
department? at
This
Kroger?
might be the worst. We're 5
No.
minutes in. Thank you for listening.
You have an
Uh,
answer.
Yeah, so I have to go with strawberry.
That's a
It's
classic.
on top, strawberry, and a close second for me would have to be banana, but not like just like eating a banana.
Same.
Like banana and chocolate or banana and peanut butter,
Yes.
something like that, you know.
Yeah.
If you really want the trifecta, peanut butter, chocolate, and banana milkshake.
That's pretty
You
good.
do all of that, that's a home run.
I got an ice cream from Aldi.
Uh-huh.
It was chocolate and banana,
So you told me about it,
and it's
and
divine.
I went and got it.
You did?
Yeah, I didn't
Wow.
tell
Is it
you
good?
that. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
about half gone.
Wow.
I don't know how much. It's like a gallon or something, but I've been eating it.
It's really good.
And
I
the
got
kids
a
are like,
brand
"Oh,
new
Dad's
one.
getting out his ice cream again." And nobody likes
No
it but me
sharing.
in the house, which is a blessing.
Yes, that's why.
You just keep hitting it up, and you know it's going to be there because nobody else likes it. So
That's a hack for sure.
yeah.
I got
All right,
it.
what's yours?
The correct answer is watermelon. Summer.
Oh,
No.
Summer is light.
Oh my goodness.
It's water, so you're hydrating. There's comedy, like you can take a sledgehammer and like smash it if you want to for laps. You can have a contest with the seeds, spitting them. It's a very versatile, delicious fruit.
Throw it off the roof.
Yeah, I'm all about watermelon.
So let me ask you
See if it-
this. I don't know if you knew this or know about this or not, but a few years ago there was this thing like TikTok. You put mustard on a watermelon. Did you know about this?
No.
To
It was
eat?
like it was a thing, and everybody, they were raving about it. I tried it, but I don't like watermelon,
Yeah.
so it was already destined to fail. I think you need to try it.
I'd be willing to try it.
You're a little late to the game on the
Yeah.
fad.
youth group
Yeah.
You
challenge.
can jump back into it.
My
Yeah.
mama used to put salt.
Well, that's
on
the
the
thing.
Salt, people
like,
put salt on
yeah,
it, yeah.
I've heard
Yeah.
that, and I just don't melons. I just don't get into it. Cantaloupe, watermelon, honeydew. No, thank
Yeah.
you.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Anyway,
Comment your favorite fruit.
yeah.
What's your
Let
best
us know.
fruit?
And if you can't comment when you see us at church, just randomly come up and say a fruit, and we'll know what you're talking about.
Hit that 1-800 number.
Yeah.
833.
833-296-9036. Text it in if you want. Hey, so we're talking about the fruit, but spiritual fruit. And in particular, we talked about how do you go about inspecting your life to see if you're exhibiting the right kind of fruit. But even more than that, like generally speaking, how do you make sure you're living in a way that honors Christ and that people can see Jesus in you? And that's really the heart of what Jesus is teaching here in Luke 6. He's taught a bunch of stuff that we've said, honestly, can be a challenge to live up to. And then at the end, he's going to say, like, okay, you need to inspect your lives to see if you're exhibiting this type of fruit or not. And then at the very end of the teaching, which we're headed toward this Sunday, he's going to say, like, someone who's wise is going to hold on to my words and live them out and build their life upon them. So for now, we're looking at our lives and saying, okay, are we living in a way that others can see Jesus in us? And so how do we do that? So one of the things we mentioned Sunday is Jesus says here that each tree is known by its fruit. So how you are known, what you are known for, the things that people see in you and in your life by your words, your actions, your attitudes, all of those things. That's one of the ways that you can evaluate your life is just how you're known. What's your reputation? I mentioned Sunday, a lot of times like your reputation walks into a room in front of you before you get there, and it lingers, it stays there after you leave because people know you in different ways. And so, and thinking about this, Joel, what are some ways, like some feedback you can give to somebody if they're like, hey, like, I don't really know exactly how people are thinking of me or talking about me. I think it's good or I think it's positive, but I want to know for sure, what are some ways that you would give somebody to kind of start discovering that or really thinking through it, other than just being like, yeah, just think about it yourselves? Because I did mention Sunday, I said, sometimes we can just step back and think about how we're behaving and how we're acting, and we can form some conclusions with that, but there may still be some blind spots. What would you give to somebody?
Yeah, I think that can be sometimes not the easiest thing, a vulnerable thing. But I think one of the things we can do is just go to people that we trust, people that we know have our best interests at heart, and just ask them some questions like, hey, are there some areas you think I can grow in? Are there some things that maybe you see in my life that are not matching God's standard? Another thing that we could do is look at the way people respond to us and treat us. Are we someone that people go to for help? Are we some people that are we people that others around us seek out for different things like prayer, for encouragement, to help others? Or are we living lives where they're pretty isolated, or we're not seeing those opportunities? Maybe that could be our fault, or maybe sometimes it's just a matter of circumstance. But if we could look at those things, ask questions to those around us, and even kind of look at, our day-to-day lives, we might find out some answers to those questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that type of evaluation is super important because it gauges how we're coming across to people. It gauges the type of fruit that we are exhibiting. And honestly, sometimes people see things in us that we don't see in ourselves. And so whether it's pride or arrogance or something like that, some of that's hard to notice in ourselves. So if we're trying to think about inspecting our lives for the type of fruit we're showing, sometimes people see things that we don't. There are some blind spots there. And so those kind of things are helpful. But honestly, like for instance, I was thinking about how we live in a culture that often tells you, like, well, you don't need to worry about what other people think. You just need to do you and be you, and who cares what everybody else thinks? They should just accept you as you are. If they love you, they're going to care about you, and you can just be you. And, if somebody's offended by how you act or whatever, that's on them. Like, who cares about that? Why do you think we should even care about this? Why do you think God cares about this? Like, why would Jesus even say to think about how other people know you and the fruit you're showing? What do you think, Josh?
Right. Well, I think as Christians, our lives, the way we live, the way we speak and act, should reflect God's character, for a reason. And Matthew 5:16 says, in the same way, let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works. And here's the important thing, give glory to your Father who is in heaven. So, how others perceive us, how they see us act and talk, and, it can affect our testimony or our influence upon the world. But more importantly, we want to use that, positively as a message to get out the gospel, to share the gospel, to show the gospel to others, and to kind of watch ourselves, because it can have the opposite effect. We want to reflect God's character in order to allow the Holy Spirit to bring people to Him. But at the same time, God cares about it because people may be viewing us and having a negative perception of Christianity, or they may see that we say one thing and do another, and it could have the opposite effect, like push people away from Christianity, which we don't want. So,
and that feeds into what Jesus had just talked about and said leading right up to this, calling people like not to judge others and not to be hypocrites, to deal with their own sin, so that way they can help other people through theirs. And really, if we are just living life to do whatever we want to do and we don't care what other people think or how they perceive us, basically we could be living like hypocrites in front of other people, and they notice and see. And that, as you said, it hinders the gospel, It doesn't honor God. And like it or not, the world is looking at us for an example, and so we should set that example. But also, in our lives, we should want to live to honor God and want to exhibit the characteristics of Christ. And so when we aren't doing that, that should not just bother other people. That should bother us as well, because we want to live in a way that pleases God. So we said, anybody else have anything else to add to that?
How do you think that we balance, the Bible has this idea of, when it talks about elders or pastors being well thought of by outsiders.
Mm-hmm.
But we also know that Jesus says that we're going to be hated like he's hated. How do you think we balance those two ideas together?
Yeah, I think in my mind, it's based on like what are the things that you're hated for. If you're hated because you're just a turd to everybody, like that's different than being hated because you stand for the gospel or whatever. And I'll say this, I've seen some preachers who kind of blur those lines, like they are sharing the gospel, but they're a jerk about it while they're doing it. It's not full of grace and truth. There's no grace or no love really presented there. It's just like a really hard, gospel, if you will. Like, I don't know. You know what I'm talking about. Just very judgmental, things like that. And I think sometimes when people respond hatefully toward those preachers, they wear it as a badge of honor. I think you got to balance that too. But if you're living full of grace and truth, as Jesus did, proclaiming the gospel, you know that not everybody's going to accept that message. You know that you can't please everybody as a pastor. That's just a reality. And so at the end of the day, you live to please God. And that's really what you got to evaluate. Like, is how I'm living the reason why people maybe are upset with me? Is it because I honored God or not?
Yeah.
I don't know. Any other thoughts on that? That's kind of how I would answer that. But
yeah.
So we mentioned, reputation's important. But the biggest thing is how people view us and how we're known. But we also obviously mentioned the main thing that Jesus keeps harping on here is the fruit that we produce. What type of fruit? Good trees bear good fruit. Bad trees bear bad fruit. And I mentioned, going to Haney's and picking apples. And imagine if you went there and it was a different type of fruit or only rotten apples, how upset that you might get because it had been advertised like, come and pick fresh apples. But oftentimes we advertise like we're Christians. So does the fruit that we are bearing and showing other people, does it match what we're advertising or what we're saying we are? It's super important to remember, which, by the way, after Sunday, I thought, man, I want one of those apple pies that I talked about.
Oh, yeah, those are great.
And I was in Nancy on Monday because I was visiting some graves and stuff, and I thought, I'm going to get me one of those apple pies, and they were closed.
They're closed, dude.
I got my hopes up. I should have known.
Yeah.
But, I thought, I thought the cemetery was out there, which, by the way, this kind of caught me off guard. It's the Mill Springs National Cemetery that's out there in honor of the veterans. They were closed on Memorial Day, which you could get into the cemetery, but the museum and everything, they were closed on Memorial Day because it's a federal holiday. But it seemed like to me they should have been open that day, really more than any other day, because that's what people are wanting to go there for. So I thought, well, if they're open and a lot of people are out here, maybe Haney's will be open today too, but it didn't work out. But anyway, I'll get me one of those apple pies
one day.
Yeah, a little side note.
Yeah.
Now I'm thinking about that. I'll have to try
Those are good with
to
ice
go out
cream.
there. Oh yeah. What about the chocolate banana ice cream?
Yeah. Throw it right on there. You're already getting 2 fruits, so it's halfway healthy.
Wow.
Yeah, there you go. I like that. That's a good way to think about it. So as we think about the fruit we produce, obviously the Bible in multiple places tells us to examine the type of fruit. Here, Jesus is saying it, almost alluding to the fact that the good fruit looks like the things that he had just taught about and how we are to live. We see in other places the good fruit being like the fruit of the Spirit. And honestly, when you look at the fruit of the Spirit and align it with a lot of the Beatitudes, that he taught about. You see a lot of those things in there as well. But anyway, so when you're thinking about that, the Bible in multiple places tells us to examine the fruit in our lives as we're living out and working out salvation, as the Bible puts it. So what are some of those areas that we should always keep looking at as we're trying to live for God? I think one of the things that stick out to me is we all know the areas that we are prone to weakness, and I think just a regular inspection of that is super important. But what else, maybe, Joel, would you offer to people to say, hey, these are some areas to think about that can go a little bit deeper than that?
Yeah, I think both Jesus and the book of James help us with this when talking about controlling our tongue and talking about the fruit of the Spirit, self-control. Just the words that you say overflow from the heart and reveal a lot of what's going on, and reveal about what you care about, your attitudes, your heart, just what you talk about. There are oftentimes I will just catch myself. I don't even intend to, but I'm just starting to complain about something to my wife and just revealing this kind of rotten attitude that I didn't even know that I had. But just before I know it, it's revealing myself. So if we look at the type of conversations where am I known in my workplace as the person that is complaining, putting people down, gossiping, all those sorts of things, those things can get out of control, even in the church. We often think we might have good intentions with the conversations that we have, but real quickly, they can just get out of control and not building up people, not encouraging people, not edifying.
Well, a lot of times with these words, like you said, it kind of reveals something deeper. It kind of reveals like an attitude, or even more than that, it can reveal maybe selfishness. You know, if you're complaining all the time, or whatever you want to say, like pessimistic all the time, you could step back and think, okay, and this kind of leads into a little bit of what we're going to talk about in a second, but what's going on in my heart? Why am I always complaining? Well, maybe you dig down and you're like, well, it's really because I'm selfish and I want what I want, and when I don't get it, and like we can track it a lot of times. Like, let's just go with this train of thought. It might be, well, when I was a kid, I used to throw a temper tantrum. And then as I got older, I started, complaining a lot or just being mad. And then I figured out, like, when I was a kid or when I was a teenager, that complaining and just throwing a fit got me what I wanted. And so I've gotten into that mindset where I still do it as an adult and just wear people down. And that's how I get what I want. And then so you start digging into that root within your heart, and then that exposes the real thing that's going on there. That's just one example, but obviously with every type of sin or bad fruit that we have, you can get down deep and really see a lot of times what's going on with that. And if you struggle with identifying that, sometimes talking to a close friend or your spouse or somebody who's close to you, like who's a godly person in your life, they can help you do that. I know that some people, get involved in therapy and stuff to really dig that out if it's, really serious and you got to, do some deeper searching. And I definitely believe there's a time and a place for that that's super appropriate. But sometimes a lot of these things can be ironed out or talked through at least and figured out by talking through just some close friend that you have. Other thoughts? I know Jesus mentioned the words here, but I didn't know if anybody else had anything else. So in thinking about with this in our lives, as we think about constantly inspecting things, I think we inspect our actions, our attitudes, our words. We already mentioned how other people know us. I think all of that's stuff that should be ongoing. And the tough part for me, I don't know about y'all, but the tough part for me is that sometimes when I'm looking for bad fruit, I'll say this. I think this analogy is probably good, and you can tell me if it's not afterwards because I'm just thinking of this on the fly. But when you go up to a tree, it's easy to look around on the ground and find the rotten fruit. When you walk up to a tree, you know that if you look on the ground, that fruit is going to be rotten. And it's easy to say, if I'm going to find some rotten fruit, that's where I go. But when you start looking around on the tree for maybe those things that have the signs of rotting fruit or bad fruit, that becomes a deeper, harder search sometimes. I think for our lives, the things that are the weakness is like that fruit on the ground. That's like, yeah, we know our weakness. It doesn't take long at all to think of, okay, that's bad fruit in our life, because we know that. We know what we struggle with. But when we start thinking deeper and thinking of other things and even the smaller things that don't honor God, that's when we start doing those deeper searches that take some time and effort and, like I said, maybe some accountability or talking with other people to reveal those things. I don't know. Was that a decent analogy or not?
Yeah, I'm tracking with you.
Okay. Fix it for me.
I mean, oftentimes we've got to go back to the root. It's easy.
I just put my foot on my chair and it set me down. I just got like a foot shorter than everybody else. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, sometimes we have to, there'll be that rotten fruit that's apparent, but sometimes, you have to go to the root of the problem that's dying or sick or disease that's causing that further rotten fruit. And so there's kind of what we talked about. Sometimes there's deeper issues to the symptoms of the sin that we're seeing in our lives. There's sometimes a deeper sin that's connected to it.
We talked about, I mentioned talking to other people. Some of the struggle is how we're known, and talking to other people, they don't know everything about us. So why is it important maybe to look at both the public and the private stuff in our lives? Josh, what do you think on that?
Well, yeah, when you talk about the public actions, which is what others see, as opposed to the private areas in our life, which to me, if I read the question correctly, that's what God sees on the heart. Jesus, he calls us to have, integrity in both of those, because our hearts and our behaviors should be aligned. We shouldn't be, doing one thing, in our heart, thinking another. To be fake, like you're going to talk about next week, to be hypocrites. It's very easy, for us to look good in public, but God, knows. God sees the heart. He knows our attitudes. He knows if we're being truthful or not. And on the opposite section, when you were just talking about when you have a negative perception in your life, whether it's complaining or something, and you do need to dig deep and look, at your heart to see what's going on in private, because eventually you could be a hypocrite and hide it, act one way in public but different in your heart. But eventually, I think it'll come out. Eventually, what did Jesus say? The mouth speaks what the heart believes, and so it'll eventually manifest itself. Which again would go back to the other question that I was talking about. We don't want anything to be a negative perception of our testimony. So,
yeah, I think it's super easy to, I'll say, like, to fall into that hypocritical view, because really when we start inspecting things, we're mostly concerned with the public perception, because the private stuff we're like, well, nobody knows about, or I can deal with it later, or whatever it is. We justify our sins. We try to think about things like that. And so when we start digging into our hearts and really figuring out what's going on, sometimes it's easy to not put in the work or the effort and just say, well, nobody knows about it, so it's not a big deal. What are some other reasons maybe that we are tempted to just deal with the outward and neglect the inside, like deeper root causes in our hearts?
I think it's something that it's really easy for us. It's natural for us in our sin to want to do. Like the hypocrites, Jesus called them whitewashed tombs. It's easier for us to have a checklist of, well, I went to church this week, I read my Bible, and I tithed. And if we could just go down this list and check things off and say, okay, I'm earning my way to God and his love and salvation, and I can point to this outward thing that gets me there. But we know that that's not real. That's not authentic. That's not what the Lord has regard for. He doesn't need our religious duties. And like, it says in the Bible, it's like filthy rags to him. What he cares about is our heart. But it's so tempting because those are things that we can control. Our culture right now is kind of really interested in habits that you can make, systems in your life that you can make. If you get up at this time and take this supplement and do this or that, you'll optimize your life. And that's really, valuable to us. That's tempting for us to do. But we know that that's not the way to the Lord's heart.
Yeah, and honestly, I think when we create those systems in our lives or those check boxes, it makes us feel good about ourselves, and it makes us feel like we've accomplished a lot. And like, it's hard to gauge spiritual health sometimes without having those check boxes, because that's like a deeper search. And I'll say this, like, the church as a whole, like, I'm not talking about Beacon Hill, but just the global church has so many great things going. But I think one of the downfalls that we've done kind of organizationally as a church is when we talked about discipleship, because it's very difficult as pastors to measure the discipleship or the spiritual growth of the people in the church. We've almost created these formulas like, oh, if you go through this series of books, or if you do this study, or if you do these things and essentially check boxes, then your people will be discipled. This is a 1-year program or a 3-year program that once they do this, they're going to be discipled and ready to lead somebody else through this program. And so essentially, like, I think sometimes we kind of have created that culture within Christianity of these check boxes, and where people are used to saying, oh, this is my 1-year chronological Bible that I'm going through, and the goal becomes going through the Bible in a year and not actually having spiritual growth from that.
Yeah.
And I think it can be very easy to do that because that's kind of how we're wired as people, to see that in our lives and to have those measurements. And I'm not saying that doing those things are bad things. I'm saying when those things become the goal or the measure, that is the bad thing, because Jesus tells us here that the goal or the measure is for the heart to be right with God and for our spirits to be right, and fruit that we produce to be good, and not just because we're doing good things, but because the heart is right and the outward outflow of that is good thing, something good from the heart. So all that's super important. So I think with that, we have to guard our hearts from this type of mentality. We have to guard our hearts in, the type of fruit that we are producing and cultivating. What are some other ways that we need to guard our hearts daily?
Yeah, I think one, important step first we see in the Old Testament a lot is just how we should, feed our heart with God's word. He says, thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. Thy word have I hidden in my heart so that I might not sin against thee. I think, practically that's one of the most, important things. And that could lead us to some other behavior changes. We should constantly, I think, in my opinion, just continue to examine our thoughts, and monitor kind of what are we consuming? We should be storing up godly things, in our heart, which again will come out of the overflow of our mouth. But just to constantly monitor, what are we bringing in to our heart that doesn't align with God's will? That's not, what God wants for us. And but again, these are daily things, like we wrote in the question. This is not like, I'll do better next week on that. This is things that me personally, I have to do daily, to make sure to constantly be alert, like in 1 Peter, about the devil and the roaring lion, prowling around, just waiting for us to fall and waiting for us to have a open opportunity to fill our life with something that God doesn't want there. So,
yeah, I think one of the things we have to be careful of when we're inspecting our lives and we see some things going on that we're not like proud of, or we know that isn't right, I think one of the things is that it's easy to swap bad fruit with fake fruit. It's easy to say, well, this is bad in my life, and so I'm going to make the outward appearance or my behavior, I'm going to swap that out for something else. The problem is that's super short-lived, because when you're putting fake fruit out there, it's not really a result of the root. It'd be like, if I took fake apples or whatever and put it on a dead tree out, it wouldn't take long to know, like, this tree is not producing this. This is just fake.
It's like a Band-Aid.
Yeah. So something to remember is when we're talking about cultivating fruit, it takes time. The reason why we're producing bad fruit is because most likely in our lives, we've sown bad seeds in our lives. We've cultivated bad habits or cultivated a sinful attitude or negativity or whatever it is. And because of that, now we're seeing the fruit of that happening in our lives. If we want to reverse it, we've got to cultivate the things of the Spirit and the things of God. And sometimes we see immediate results of some of that. Other times, it takes some time to see the fruit. But there is a promise that we see in the Bible, either way we go, and the promise is that you reap what you sow. What you get back in harvest is what you plant something, you get it back in harvest, whether good or bad, righteous or evil, you get back what you sow. So as you think about that, know that there's a promise for putting in the work, putting forth the effort of digging into your heart and figuring out what needs to happen with that, praying through that, living out God's word, and knowing that ultimately while you're putting forth the effort, He's the one that does the work. He's the one that grows you and matures you and changes you to be more like Christ. Well, I hope you've enjoyed our podcast today, even with the side notes and all. Joel, you'll have to give us an update on how the mustard and watermelon goes.
Yeah.
I'll do it here on the podcast.
You will?
Yeah,
Gracious.
I'll do it here.
Okay. Well, help us remember that. We're going to have to set it up now.
Nobody throwing up on the podcast.
I love that. I love that. We could...
I've eaten worse things.
Yeah. We could do lots of things. You just opened up so many doors and windows here. Hey, we're glad you joined us today. Let me mention, if you don't have a church home, we'd love to have you come to Beacon Hill. We started on Sundays at 10:30 with worship, but we also have groups at 9:15 beforehand. We'd love you. We love you. Yes, we love you. We would love for you to be a part of that and come out and see what God can do in your life as you're around other believers, growing in His Word and worshiping Him regularly. Super important. If you don't have a church home, we'd love to see you. Well, you all have a good rest of your week, and we'll talk to you next time.
You've been listening to the Beacon Hill Podcast. For more information about Beacon Hill Baptist Church, visit beaconhillbaptist.com.